Inside a modern clinical environment, cognitive neuroscience offers us a precise window into human behavior. We can observe the physical mechanics of how two people interact. 3 years ago, a team of researchers conducted a functional MRI study to analyze the brain dynamics of 96 couples. They placed the subjects in scanners and exposed them to a series of marital and non-marital visual stimuli, tracking the neural connectivity of each pair. The researchers measured relationship satisfaction across the cohort. When they cross-referenced those satisfaction scores against demographic data, they found a stark anomaly. There was no statistical correlation between relationship longevity and factors like age, ethnicity, or socioeconomic background. This animated model represents the study's actual metric of success. The researchers found that high marital satisfaction correlated entirely with synchronized whole brain activation. The couples reporting the highest stability exhibited nearly mirrored activation patterns when processing the same information. This data indicates that long-term connection relies heavily on an observable biological alignment achieved over time, rather than a static demographic match established on paper. This raises a specific mechanical question. By what processes do two distinct human brains align their internal activation patterns? Popular psychology often relies on the concept of instant soulmates, or a mystical, inexplicable click to explain compatibility. Biology requires a heavier burden of proof. To understand neural synchronization, we have to look at 3 structural pillars of human cognition: data accumulation, limbic regulation, and the hedonic cycle. Examining human connection through the lens of cognitive load and data processing strips away the traditional romance of the subject. However, it provides a functional blueprint for how partnerships actually endure. Constructing a successful relationship is, at its core, a neurological adaptation problem. It is a system that requires active, mechanical management. Let's examine how the brain evaluates maturity. Society tends to link relationship readiness to chronological milestones. There is no neurological threshold crossed exactly at age 25 or 30 that suddenly equips a human for partnership. Chronological age is merely a proxy for time passed. This scatterplot models biological maturity. The x-axis is chronological age, and the y-axis tracks the volume of processed experiential data. The brain measures maturity strictly by the volume of social interactions, trial, and error it has cataloged. A 25-year-old with dense experiential data is neurologically better equipped to handle interpersonal friction than a sheltered 40-year-old. This catalog of experiential data powers a mechanism called the adaptive subconscious, often referred to as thin slicing. When you meet someone new, your brain spends milliseconds observing microexpressions and tone, rapidly cross-referencing those inputs against its historical database. As this occurs, mirror neurons engage. If the incoming data aligns with your internal neurological profile, the brain signals compatibility. What we commonly describe as a magical intuition or an instant click is simply high-speed biological big data processing. That data processing engine works well in a vacuum. It fractures during interpersonal conflict. The blue prefrontal cortex governs logic, while the red limbic system governs emotion. They operate on a biological seesaw. As emotion spikes during conflict, the limbic system heavily activates. Because of their mechanical antagonism, the prefrontal cortex is physically suppressed. Expecting a rational, objective conversation in the middle of a heated argument is neurologically impossible. The hardware required for logic is offline. To restore function, the brain requires a specific cognitive hack, third-person cognitive framing. By consciously stepping outside of the immediate emotional perspective and analyzing the dispute as a neutral third-party observer, the brain forces immediate limbic deactivation. Emotional maturity, therefore, is not a passive personality trait. It is the learned, active suppression of the limbic system, allowing the prefrontal cortex to regain control and process the conflict logically. Managing that emotional friction requires significant energy. The human brain operates under strict constraints regarding social interaction. Evolutionary psychologist Robin Dunbar quantified the biological limits of human social cognition. The brain allocates a finite cognitive load across relationship tiers based on communication intensity. The center is reserved for an intimate partner. Maintaining this bond requires massive effort. The brain can allocate this peak intimacy budget to a maximum of 1.5 individuals. The biological cost is immense. The brain simply cannot sustain multiple maximum intimacy bonds simultaneously with cognitive burnout. Because establishing a primary bond requires such a heavy draw on the brain's energy resources, constantly swapping partners and starting the bonding process over from scratch is a highly inefficient biological strategy. Even when that primary energy-intensive bond is established, it faces the physical reality of habituation. Couples frequently point to boredom as a sign of relationship failure. Neurologically, boredom is a structural baseline feature of the human brain. Introducing a novel stimulus releases a sharp spike of dopamine. As the stimulus becomes predictable, the reward decays back to a flat baseline. The brain adapts to constant stimuli to conserve energy. The chemical high of a new relationship will inevitably stabilize. Seeking a new partner to cure this boredom provides a temporary dopamine spike, but it merely restarts the exact same inevitable biological decay. Overcoming the hedonic cycle requires dynamic behavioral adaptation. You must alter the shared experiences, environments, and inputs to create novel stimuli, rather than discarding the person. Long-term satisfaction relies entirely on recognizing and actively managing the brain's inherent and inescapable tendency toward boredom. The biological mechanics of connection demand significant cognitive labor. This stands in sharp contrast to passive cultural beliefs surrounding romance. One prominent example is the law of attraction, popularized by manifestation theories and literature. These concepts suggest that simply visualizing an ideal partner will bring them into your life. Clinically, this creates a pseudo-satisfaction trap. The brain gets a mild chemical reward from the fantasy, which halts the actual physical effort required to meet people and process social data. This flowchart maps the post hoc ergo propter hoc fallacy. If someone visualizes a partner and later finds one, they falsely link event A directly to event B. They ignore the dense middle steps, the behavioral adaptations, the social networking, and the sheer probability of interacting with others. Attributing relationship success to a mystical manifestation is a cognitive shortcut. It prevents individuals from doing the necessary, often uncomfortable work of modifying their own behavior. Let's return to the study of the 96 couples. Returning to these fMRI models, we can see that the synchronized neural activation of the highly satisfied couples is not the stroke of luck. It is the physical result of years of active, longitudinal data processing. By repeatedly utilizing third-person framing to resolve conflicts, and by collaboratively managing the hedonic cycle to prevent stagnation, the couples physically wired their neural responses to align. This neural synchronization is never static. It requires constant maintenance to prevent the bonds from deteriorating under new cognitive loads. Long-term connection is the arduous process of restructuring two distinct brains, training them to process inputs in unison, and facing the environment as a single, unified system.